Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dabo Swinney, the Clemson Tigers landing another massive commitment in the 2025 cycle coming from four-star defensive lineman Bryce Davis, who, I'll come out and say it. After watching a bunch of film on Bryce Davis, he does kind of remind you of Peter Woods as a defensive line prospect, where you look at Bryce Davis and say, where is he going to play on the defensive line? He is a heavy-handed edge rusher that seems to have a lot of growth potential to put on some weight and move on the inside of the defensive line, but a guy that Clemson can get, really creative in terms of where they want him on the defensive line. And we've seen Clemson, use their defensive linemen in a lot of different ways, right? Peter Woods obviously playing on the inside, but they're going to play more of an edge rusher spot in the 2024 season. You look at a guy like Brian Brzee, a guy that started on the inside, had a lot of reps as an edge rusher as well. Clemson likes to get creative in terms of how they use defensive linemen. And a guy like Bryce Davis, at least in my mind, fits exactly what Clemson wants in their defensive linemen. And you look at the Clemson class in 2025, Dabo Swinney knows the recipe. He knows how he wants to build this Clemson roster, and it starts on the defensive line. Their top four commitments, all line of scrimmage players on the defensive side of the football. Bryce Davis being arguably the most fascinating of the bunch. Going to get into the film of Bryce Davis, talk about what he brings to this Clemson defense. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Clemson fans, all the support you guys have shown as we've broken down these commitments. It means the world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Bryce Davis now. You take a look at Bryce Davis. This is another one of those kids that I think can be a riser going into his senior year, where you go back to the junior year, he only played in 2 games due to injury. Now, in those 2 games, he had 17 tackles, 6 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks, extremely productive as a junior. But you go back to the sophomore film and say 92 tackles, 22 tackles for a loss, 12 sacks. This kid has been doing it at a high level for a very long time at the high school ranks, and you kind of just feel good about the transition that he's going to make to the collegiate level. Again, Peter Woods kind of reminds you of him. Again, Peter Woods coming out of high school was 6'3", 270 pounds. I think Bryce Davis could get to a similar body composition as he comes into Clemson. And then I think Clemson just has to make the decision on, hey, what do we want this kid to look like? But more importantly, what do we want him to do on this Clemson defensive line, whether he's playing as a heavy-handed edge rusher role or playing as a 3-tech. This kid can do a lot of different things, and I think has a lot of different directions that he can go as a defensive lineman at the next level. Going to get into just a little bit of the film, and I think the first thing you got to talk about is the blend of, this kid has some serious power. Some big-time power in the hands, but also flashes some really, really nice athleticism. And you look at Peter Woods and what made him so successful year one for Clemson. It was, kind of that combination of, hey, we have that grown man strength to play along the line of scrimmage, challenge offensive linemen in terms of the power we have in our hands, but also being a premier athlete for that size. And there was just not that many offensive linemen that could deal with that combination of power, athleticism. Bryce Davis flashes those kind of 2 similar traits as well. You get into the film. First thing you see is, again, really good get off and bend for a kid that is 250 pounds almost. And coming off the edge, one really good get off. You see a little bit of bend around the edge, using his hands, running the arc, getting the quarterback, some really nice closing speed as well. Now, what's so fascinating about this piece of film, these are only 2 games that we got to see from Bryce Davis, but he has some really, really nice tape in those 2 games. You continue to work through the film. And again, a lot of different formations and a lot of different spots that Bryce Davis plays, kind of playing in that 3-3-5 where he's playing outside of the tackle here. Can do a lot of things you like, right? Really good instincts, going up, getting the big mitts on the football. This kid understands the game of football, which I think is very beneficial for Clemson as well in terms of playing early. You look at Bryce Davis again, love what he does against the run. And this is a guy that routinely keeps his outside shoulder free, forcing guys back to the inside, but can play on the perimeter and play in space, which is becoming really important. Again, when you look at your defensive linemen with how many teams that are trying to get the ball out in space, out on the perimeter. You got to have defensive linemen that can operate in space and go run the line of scrimmage. Bryce Davis is a guy that can do that. You continue to work through the film. And again, now we're working a little bit more on the inside here, using our hands to get off a block, getting behind the line of scrimmage, again, running the line of scrimmage. This is kind of similar to the Peter Woods film where he would play some edge rusher at high school, would play on the inside. When Bryce Davis is on the inside, his quickness and hand usage is just too much for a lot of offensive linemen to deal with, especially on the inside. Again, working, using his hands, splitting a double team, showing the athleticism in terms of running the line of scrimmage. A lot of different ways that Bryce Davis can impact the game. Love what he does against the run again. He's a guy that if you want to win at the point of attack, you better be damn good because he's a guy that knows how to use his hands. He knows how to get off blocks. What he does in the run, this is the type of stuff that lets you play as a true freshman. And you see a lot of kids from the high school level jump up and say they have the athletic profile to be good pass rushers, but a lot of times a liability at the point of attack, stopping the run. Bryce Davis is anything but that. He's going through two guys pretty much right there. You see the raw power he has in his hands. Now playing a little bit more in space. And again, really, really good hand usage. Nice swim move, closing the distance on the quarterback. A lot of different things that Bryce Davis can do on the defensive side of the football as an edge rusher, as an interior defensive lineman. You kind of just want to bet on these kids, the guys that are easy to get involved, you can move around, be versatile with. And you look at Clemson's class in 2025, and what I love most about Dabo Swinney and what he does on the recruiting trail is he knows what the bread and butter is for Clemson being an elite program. And it has always started on the defensive line. And you take a look at the prioritization of defensive linemen, Amari Adams, Isaiah Campbell, two top 10 defensive linemen in the 2025 class. You look at the edge rusher position, guys like Ari Watford. Now you add Bryce Davis. Clemson is prioritizing the defensive line like they do every single year. You look at why Clemson has had so much success in the ACC over the last couple of seasons. They overwhelmed teams in the front seven. A lot of the Clemson fans know, why am I so high on Clemson heading into 2024? It's because what they have in the front seven, specifically on the defensive line. How do you routinely get top defensive lines in the country every single year? You get these guys out of the high school ranks. It's extremely hard to find game record defensive linemen in the transfer portal because you have to pay a pretty penny, and there's just not that many guys that hit the portal, and everyone wants them. The best way to build a strong defensive line is grabbing as many of these bodies as you can at the high school recruiting class and then building from there. And that is exactly what Clemson is doing in 2025. And for Clemson fans, I think you got to be kind of fired up in terms of Clemson making it happen at the most important positions on the high school recruiting trail. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.